Welcome to another edition of Irish Illustrated Insider. I'm Tim O'Malley, joined today by Tim Priester and Eric Thomas of Irish Illustrated. And Eric Thomas is back on the show for the second straight week because we expect more recruiting news, actually in the wake of tight end Ian Premer, four-star, Great Bend, Kansas, number 3 tight end of the country. Bit of a surprise there, Eric. So I want to start with you because we actually had a couple of questions on this. It did not seem like he was going to be in the class. Is there any insight on how they were able to pull this tight end in?
Yeah, pretty big surprise when Kansas State crystal ball picks go in the night before and the morning of, and the kid ends up picking Notre Dame. It's a little bit of a unique one. By all accounts, he was gone to Kansas State as of the morning of, even as late as that point. The Kansas State coaches had great conversations with him, but they recognized even within all of that sourcing up until that point that Notre Dame was remaining involved. There was a consistent flow of information and communication going between the two parties. And what I think the surprise comes from is even after his unofficial visit, for folks that recall, when Ian visited Notre Dame kind of earlier in the spring, there was a sense that Notre Dame was kind of further ahead on his list, especially internally in South Bend, than the public knew. He's sort of a notoriously private person. The camp is very private. They don't let a lot of the thought process leak out to the public. And a lot of the things that were being sourced were from secondary sources, right? People who know them, people who know him, whatever it was. So I think Notre Dame was a little bit higher up in the family's perception than the public market really was aware of for quite some time. And what Notre Dame was able to do on the official visit was really kind of key in on the idea that Premer didn't need to stay local in order to maximize, his ability. In order to stay in his comfort zone, he maybe not necessarily was going to, you know, be the best version of himself at the next level. Notre Dame really hit well on that point. And then in the final few hours, I know that they gave the full court press. They gave the full considerations of things to consider. We'll leave it there. But they made a compelling offer for him in the last 24 hours that ultimately I think bridged the gap that he had with just moving out of his comfort zone kind of around the greater Kansas area. So they had a lot of things to offer him up to that point. It was really that last question. And by all accounts, Notre Dame in the last 24 hours, especially, gave Premer enough reasons to consider making that move.
They probably reminded him that when you talk about tight end Kansas State is not on
No.
that list.
Yeah.
I mean, again, because it was so private, Eric, and you guys, you and Brian all know way, and Tom Loy know way more about these proceedings. But the impression I guess I kind of got was he's more comfortable being a big fish in a small pond.
Mm-hmm.
But Notre Dame's, I think he'll thrive at Notre Dame if he's a private kind of keep it to yourself kind of guy. I think the environment at Notre Dame will be very good for him. He's sensational, man. I mean, he's got
Absolutely.
long arms, long legs, kind of a, you know, unorthodox running style. I think Gabe Brooks from 24/7 used that reference, and it's kind of true. It's kind of like a jailbreak for him. But I mean, he just plays so passionately. And the word that I used in his attempts to get to the end zone, he plays with desperation. He's
Mm-hmm.
desperate to get to the end zone, and that's just a really great quality to have. He's an excellent basketball player. I don't know if you guys have seen any
Yeah.
video, but he averaged 24 and a half points per game, left-handed shooter, really adept in the paint. I mean, looks like I because of his height, 6'4", 6'5", probably not a major college
Right.
prospect, but he could play basketball in college. There's no doubt about that. He plays baseball too. I made a comment about the hitch in his swing. He
Yeah.
doesn't have a great swing for college baseball, but the other two sports he's really good at. And
Just let
man,
Ben
I
Brock
mean,
know before he gets a hold of me as a hitch in his swing. And
yeah,
Michael, thank you for that one,
yeah.
Eric.
No, I don't think he should attempt to do that. But I mean, he's just a tremendous catch. And, like I was surprised by it the same way, Tim, you and I were on signing day when Madden
Yeah.
Faremo
Yeah.
Yeah.
wasn't that like I had to like control my emotions because I was so like I couldn't believe it. They got him on this day
It was
and
such a weird way when Marcus Freeman announced that. We were just like,
I know. And it
what?
Mm-hmm.
was
How do we not know
yeah,
this?
it was done pretty matter of factly
Yeah.
by him. But I mean, just really a sensational prospect. And I'm sure I talked about small town Jack Kaiser. Jack Kaiser's town was much, much smaller.
Yeah.
But when you hear about his story and it was rare air when he was being recruited, obviously the big time schools don't come into Great Bend, Kansas very often to recruit. So, you start adding that all up and you like, okay, well, I understand why maybe he wants to stay small time or local. But man, he's got a great chance to be
Oh
really,
yeah.
really good. And now you've got a pair with Preston Frizzell.
Right.
And I mean, I cannot imagine anybody in the country that has a better tight end duel in one class than that.
Well, I really liked Eric's story too, talking about that's on the heels of James Flanagan, who,
Yeah.
I mean, opportunity knocks for Flanagan. You want to talk about
Mhm.
violently wanting to get to the end zone and violently finishing things? I'll be going back to Milwaukee on August 21st this year, I believe. And last year, of course, they know all about James Flanagan. And there were a lot of guys there that wanted James Flanagan to be hitting people rather than catching passes at Notre Dame. But that's a heck of a 2 year haul. I think Eric, that was a great point. They're back at it as tight end you when you can get those three guys in 2 seasons.
Yeah, it's kind of an awesome point for them right now with that recruiting as well, because Mike Denbrock has told several wide receiver recruits that increasing the vertical nature of the passing offense is a key priority, and that's something that we've heard message from Notre Dame as well. But when he talked about it with Braden Robinson at his official visit specifically, he mentioned that part of it was getting the pieces in place. And when you think about that, your first thought is obviously quarterbacks, receivers, but tight ends like this open up so much for those
Yeah.
offenses, especially when they can, produce value not only, at all areas of the field, but as vertical threats themselves. There's a really good tie-in with these two tight ends specifically with that future outlook that I think Notre Dame can be really, really bullish on, in addition to obviously the established inline presence of Flanagan. The 2 year haul, no matter how you look at it, is just so forward thinking with the vision they have for this offense. It's tough not to get excited about.
We're going to try to avoid a Irish Illustrated Insider podcast jinx and mention that we believe three-star linebacker Ellis McGaskin, he's a composite four-star from Mobile, Alabama, is going to sign with Notre Dame today. And pretty sure I want to go to you first because you just mentioned here off the air it's one of your favorite types of players.
Man, class of 2027, just to,
Yes, yes.
to
Clarify.
emphasize that the first non-long snapper to commit in the class.
You got to get a few of those in 27, and you can move on to linebackers. It's fine.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this guy, I'm going to say it right off the bat. The guy that I first thought of in looking at Ellis McGaskin, the linebacker from Mobile, Alabama, was Bobby Howard, who was a linebacker
Oh,
in Notre Dame. For the younger listeners, including you, Eric.
late
I think,
90s and a player.
yeah, I think
Yes.
you would have been a senior about the time you were born, as a matter of fact. But Bobby Howard was from the same high school as Randy Moss in West Virginia. And Moss didn't make it to Notre Dame, but Bobby Howard did. And he was a leader, quiet leader. I mean, as quiet of a player as you're ever going to run across, but he let his play handle it. In fact, I remember writing a story, and I all I did was I went around and asked players and coaches about him. I had no quotes from Bobby Howard because he wasn't going to
Huh.
it wasn't going to benefit the story in any way. And that's who Ellis McGaskin reminds me of. Only this guy, I mean, I don't remember Bobby Howard being this physical. It's hard for me to remember anybody pound for pound that's more physical than Ellis McGaskin. He's listed at 6'1", 190. I've seen him list himself at 205. I don't know what's accurate right now. I think he will fill out. And look, if he's 16 years old, he may not be done growing, and that would
Yeah.
help him if he could get to that 6'1" and a half, 6'2" range. But this guy will knock you into next week. The level of physicality with everything he does, kick coverage. They put him at running back. He is a monster hitter, and I just love. I mean, anybody that just relishes contact and loves playing the game like him. I have to put him in the 4-star
Mhm.
category, and I don't. It doesn't really matter how tall he is. You want a player like this on your team.
Yeah, when post signing day, when he was still at Notre Dame, Chad Bowden and Marcus Freeman did a media appearance for Notre Dame, and they basically talked about when they're identifying defensive players, one of the hallmarks that they look for is they don't want guys they call head turners. They want guys who are going to be physical at the point of contact. They're going to, really put their helmet on the ball, and they're going to form tackle consistently. You're not going to turn your head to avoid the contact. You're not going to lean on arm tackles. And McGaskin is that guy. He is as sure as they come when it comes to tackling, just violent and physical. And he's what I really appreciate about his game, and I was talking to him about this earlier, there's a little bit of the Jalen Sneed situation there where he's an outside linebacker and a bit of a smaller frame. So his skill set and his body type are almost not at odds with one another, but in a traditional sense, maybe you would think that. But my God, is he just so quick? And what Tim talked about, that physicality, there's a quickness to ID. Like if you're doing a slow handoff where you're trying to draw his eyes to the quarterback and create that confusion, he's very good at quickly planting his foot, turning his hips, and getting, his momentum onto the running back. He's very quick at identifying what's in front of him. And when he plays in space, what I appreciate for a smaller player is he gets kind of lost in the offensive line. So there's a couple of clips on his tape where you'll see like the quarterback clearly does not know he's underneath in the passing lane, and he goes to throw a little check off, and oh well, there's the linebacker. Some of them get picked, some of them get tipped, knocked down, whatever it is. But there's a lot of utility and flexibility for traditional linebacker roles in there that I think maybe Sneed had more of a developmental look. So it's not quite the same as what it was back then. But there's just so much to be excited about with a player like this. And like TP said, on the still growing part, he is probably about 6 foot, 6.5 feet, not quite 6'1".
That's what I would say.
When we saw him in person, though, I compared his frame a little bit to Tavon Coney's, in that he has that square shoulder build where you see there's room to add good muscle. Like visibly, there is room to add, especially weight up top. I think that with his build, it looks like a player who isn't done growing, to TP's point. I think he probably still has a little bit to grow vertically, and he definitely has plenty of room on his frame to add weight. And when you're looking at an undersized player with outside responsibility like that, that's exactly what you want to see.
Tim, I was watching film of him pretty late last night, and I just started watching film, and about halfway through, I thought, I wonder how many tackles this guy has, you know? And then you look, he had 142 as a freshman and 130 as a sophomore. I mean, and I laughed out loud because it's like, okay, well that makes a whole lot of sense. Now he's from Mobile. He wasn't offered a scholarship by Alabama, Georgia, Texas, or Oklahoma. But
he was Auburn and Arkansas down. I know.
Well, yeah, and Tennessee and Mississippi and South Carolina and Ohio State and Michigan. So
and Notre Dame, because they went farther than everybody except for Ohio State. So.
Yes, exactly. So I don't think USC offered him, but I mean, and I get it. The Alabamas and Georgias are in a position where they don't have to offer an undersized guy, and he'll probably never be a Mike. He probably can grow into a Will, but you could probably use him at Rover. He's like right now, he's like a strong safety in the box. You want him close to the football. He is a good pass dropper. I mean, I like everything about him, except you'd like him to be just a little bit taller. But
exactly,
he is one hell of a football player. It's a great. I mean, I love starting a 27 class. Again, beyond the special teams, I love starting with a guy like that. That's a kind of I mean, you could put his tape on, and that's your Pied Piper of the class moving forward.
Eric, I think we've teased this will be the third podcast now, but 3 wide receivers coming up. Some announcements coming up this weekend. As Tim Priester said, I only need one, Gaeton Finley. But 3 guys looking to, now is it the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, or I believe 4th, 5th, and 6th, where there are announcements coming. And you've been all over this one. I know there's not super new intel, but you probably agree with Priester that there's one priority target here.
Yeah, luckily he goes first. So it makes it a fun little run there. But yeah, everything about those 3 right now is that Notre Dame is still in a good spot. Heading out of the official visit weekend, the tenor of the news was that Notre Dame had put themselves in the driver's seat for all 3. Obviously, at that point, Finley had some unfinished business. The other 2 wrapped up things. Fitzgerald had to announce that the UNC visit was off, but he was effectively done. So there's not a whole lot to base new information off of. What I can say on the Finley side of things is that I've spent a lot of time talking to sources in Texas following his official visit in Austin. It sounds like there is no change or surge of confidence from the Texas side, which is a bit unexpected, frankly, given where they were even at the end of May, kind of into April. Bit of a surprise that it seems like the visit just didn't quite punch to the point where there's a surge in that confidence. So I think Notre Dame is in a good place there with everything that was coming out of his official visit. And then with Fitzgerald and Robinson, the moving up of the date for Robinson, especially that weird couple days where we're not so sure what's going on here. And then it sort of surged to a more positive place. And then the date got moved up. all of that is lending itself to, Notre Dame getting that one done to wrap out the trio. And then Devin Fitzgerald, the man in the middle. Personal reasons why I'm real excited about that one, but he just is fresh off of a really strong performance at the OT7 event. Folks down there consistently said that he looked faster than he did on film. He looked like he had taken the physicality to a little bit of a different level. I know John Bryce retweeted a couple clips of him making uh, some pretty impressive catches that were reminiscent of what his dad did in Arizona for over a decade. So it's really a solid group that Notre Dame should feel confident that, this time next week they'll have a much more robust group of pass catchers. I think we'll leave it there, but it's looking good.
I think Braden Robinson, is a lot like Bubba Frazier. I mean, they're smaller speed guys, especially is Robinson's a little bit smaller. Is he a little bit smaller?
He's like 5'7", 5'8".
Yeah,
His height's all over the place, but he's not over 5'8" and a half.
Yeah, I know I mean, a lot of people have talked about blazing fast. I don't know that I'd put him in that category, but he's very, very fast. And I'm intrigued. Tio, I know you're anybody that's a Larry Fitzgerald offspring, you're all in on.
That you're right. It's just the best hands of all time. I still contend Larry Fitzgerald is the third best wide receiver I've ever watched in my life, with Jerry Rice, Randy Moss, and Larry Fitzgerald. And I think his playoff run that got them to the precipice of a Super Bowl win is one of the exclamation points on that one.
Right when I moved to Philadelphia. Great year.
Oh, nice. Really? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
When you mention names from the 1990 recruiting class, Tim Priester, you'll first get to Bettis and Flanagan and Young and Taylor and Carter, Jeff Burris. Oliver Gibson, however, was the 1989 USA Today High School Football Defensive Player of the Year. He was part of that class, and he passed away at the age of 53 over the weekend. I knew he was a solid NFL player. I did not realize Oliver Gibson, as a nose guard, finished with 17 and a half sacks and 243 tackles in a career with mostly the Steelers and Bengals. Fourth-round draft pick, 1995. What are some recollections of him? Because that is the greatest recruiting class in Notre Dame history.
Yeah, I mean, how does the USA Today Player of the Year be considered underrated when you play with the guys that he did? But yeah, he was underrated. I mean, he was an underrated nose tackle, and the numbers that you talk about in the NFL I think are surprising to most. Fourth round draft pick, an easy guy to like. Did you have any interaction with him?
Yeah. He was 1 year older than me, but he ended up leaving college the same year as me because he did redshirt. He's one of the few guys on that team, one of the few pros on that team that did end up redshirting for that 1990 team. But he's it's when I saw the news and I was
I don't know
shocked.
any of the details. I need to call some people from that era. I don't know any of the details, but Oliver's was a great dude, and like I said, quietly productive a lot of times for another great Notre Dame team.
Yes. Looking to upgrade your wardrobe? Founded by Notre Dame alum Gal Wang, you've seen ESQ's custom clothing on the player walk and all of your favorite players and coaches. With more than a decade of making the best bespoke clothing available, ESQ will help you look and feel your best. From a perfect fitting suit or sport coat, shirt, or bomber jacket, or that perfect tuxedo for wedding season, check out esqclothing.com and book an appointment to upgrade your wardrobe today. Mention Irish Illustrated and get 10% off your entire purchase. That's esqclothing.com. We'll be back with segment 2, Burning Up the Boards. Welcome back to segment 2, Burning Up the Boards. Our first question from Pokey Irish 11. As we look forward to learning more about the upcoming opponents, where do Notre Dame's coordinators rank among our schedule? And I'll point out that Tim Priester's first-rate series always either ends with coaches or schedule, so he will have to get through the defense first. But Tim, I have a feeling you did some research on this one.
Yeah, I'm not quite there yet. We just finished up offensive line, and Notre Dame still. We've clearly determined that the scoring system is nonsense. I didn't start it 15 years ago for
a scoring system. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was more to let you know where Notre Dame sat, but we'll work on that. That'll be next year's project. But coordinators, I mean, I think, everything I've done so far in this series this year, everything points to Notre Dame, Miami, and Texas A&M.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, right now, Miami is is kind of the hot one with Shannon Dawson as their offensive coordinator and Corey Heatherman, who came from Minnesota, where were very good under him. He's now their defensive coordinator. So that's the duo that a lot of people are talking about. Obviously, Notre Dame's Mike Denbrock and Chris Ash would be up near the top. Yeah, I think when you look at USC, Lincoln Riley is the play caller, and then Danton Lynn, who went from UCLA to USC last year. I think we saw, the like this happened with Al Golden. The transition to first year isn't as good as it becomes the second and third year, and so that's a concern with Danton Lynn. But man, USC lost a ton of productive players on defense, so that's a bit of a transition. Pittsburgh, Randy Bates is their defensive coordinator, highly respected. When Texas A,
Tim might have froze a little bit there.
I thought that guy was really, really good. Jay Bateman is their defensive coordinator, however, and I don't have a real high opinion of him and what he did, certainly at North Carolina, when somebody make a big play against Jay Bateman's defense, and you could always count on the players looking at each other and pointing at each other. It's your fault. No, it's your fault. No, it's your fault. Having Mike Elko as the head coach probably helps Jay Bateman. But I mean, it'll be a few weeks before we have the actual ranking. But I think right now the Miami pairing is and Notre Dame's pairing, of course, too, are the ones that everybody's talking about.
Well, of course, Drew Cronick back at Navy, offensive coordinator. And then I found I always forget Bobby Petrino at Arkansas, but Dick Ketter retired from coaching, but he remained as an offensive analyst for Boise State, who will also bring to South Bend co-defensive coordinator Tyler Stockton. So that's a fun two fun facts there.
Former Notre Dame
and also offensive specialist at Syracuse is Josh Gaddis.
Really?
Yeah, that's an interesting dynamic too. I missed that hire completely. So thank you very much, Pokey. Pokey Irish 11 for asking that question, because I would not have looked those things up yet.
Question from J Crone 031. We're in a bit of an era of good feelings right now. Recruiting is great. Retention may be better. Coming off a championship run season. 2 questions on this front. 1, how much does this change your job day to day? The work product here is always good, but this seems to be a great period for having newsworthy stuff and positive vibes for the subscribers. How different is this than, say, winter of 2009, the Frozen Four, and other fiasco times? We'll ask the second question.
Let's throw it to Eric on how it changes his job in the positive first, and Tim and I can answer how the negative was in those eras, because those were dark days.
Well, on the recruiting side, it's certainly a lot less digging for me. There are some times where you get a little bit of a stagnation, and from one reason or another, and you end up trying to find news and trying to find the updates and going looking for things. I don't have to go looking very often right now, and there's so much excitement. So it makes things very, very easy for myself and Alton. It definitely makes there's no shortage of newsworthy things to write about and to consider and go on that side. I can say this time last year was maybe a little bit quieter, so have a direct comparison.
In terms of negative, Tim, I mean, Frozen 4, I remember you wrote about it. We were not working together yet. We started working together right after that season. So the Frozen 4 was rough because they kept throwing Brian Kelly out there, not able to give answers. Oh. He wasn't able to give the answers. He wasn't allowed to give the answers. And if he could, he didn't have the answers. So Kelly had to keep coming out and talking about it. That was a weird time. 2009, when you knew Weiss was in trouble, was after the Navy game. He was absolutely fine at 6-2. And they lost to Navy. Jack Swarbrick eventually said we did not see Navy coming. I will never forget sitting in what's the morning press conference? It used to be Tuesday back then. And we were sitting around and there was national reporters there and they were asking questions about Navy. And Charlie Weiss said, does anybody want to talk about Pittsburgh, the next opponent? And the exact response was, I'll pass. And you realize it was only going to get worse. They lost to Pitt. They, of course, lost to Connecticut to end it and Stanford to completely end it. But that was a weird time. That was my first official season with Irish Eyes, was 2009, and that ending of the season.
Remember when Brian Kelly asked, does anybody have any questions about USC?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. That
when
was
it
a
was
Frozen
about,
Four. That's when it broke, right?
yeah,
Frozen. Oh my gosh, it breaks during USC week, and no one has USC questions.
right. Yeah. Yeah,
So
I mean, I look, anything's better than back in the day when I was at Blue and Gold Illustrated, when if the phone rang, Samoji or I had to answer it.
yeah, that's bad.
And I mean, you want
Kirk
to talk
Herbstreit
about
always
a,
says, "Don't take calls." He means on the radio. You were doing it in the
yeah, I
office.
mean, you want to talk about a constant stream of bitching. That's what that was all about at that time. But I mean, it's better, but the job doesn't change. I mean, we do more like what we do for recruiting, like when somebody commits, we do more for that than we've ever have at any time in
Coaching changes your job the most when you know
Oh
a
God,
coaching
no
change is
doubt.
coming.
Yeah,
That's
that's
number
when
one.
like that January and February can be pretty
Mhm.
miserable with all that stuff. And then
As
when you have
opposed to
a
last January.
yeah, like when you have
Yeah,
a defensive coordinator hired and
yeah.
then you don't and he goes back to the school he was at. But yeah, look, it's always better. What we just experienced, I wrote about it in Thursday Thoughts last week, that what we're experiencing now, where everything is upbeat and everybody loves Marcus Freeman. And I can go back to the days that even when Lou Holtz was winning, averaging 11 wins a year for 6 years, there were the people that didn't. We may have a question here that applies to this later, but there were people that just they didn't like Lou Holtz. They didn't like the way he coached. They certainly didn't like how much Notre Dame ran the football, that they could be better if they just threw it more. I heard about that all the time, but the workload doesn't ever change, but the frame of mind's better when you make a run to the national title. And everybody loves the head coach. And I don't know if I said on here or not, but I mean, Marcus Freeman is so well liked that people that hate Notre Dame don't
Right.
hate him quite as much because they like Marcus Freeman,
Yeah.
which is a phenomenon that I have never experienced in going into my 44th year covering Notre Dame football.
Certainly not last time. Last two times. Double question here. I like this one from James Murphy on Twitter and then Statman. Does Freeman's commitment to an aggressive mindset and his headline expectation of violence require our comfort, with higher levels of player injury? In other words, do you characterize Notre Dame's 2024 injury performance over 13 games? Is that something that should be repeating in 2025? Let's deal with that part first.
Eric, you want to go ahead? I mean, I'm not
I
really
tend to think
sure.
so. I tend to think so, actually, because I think he does it in practice too.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think the practice side of it, just the total volume of violent physical reps is always going to correlate more with injuries. But I also do think to some extent there is, if you want to look about it this way, looking for violent players, these are guys that are not going to turn their head or put themselves in a bad situation to get hurt. Hesitation often leads to injuries. So on like a game day perspective, I don't necessarily think that that's the case, but just total volume of reps, I have to think that that is going to lead to increased injuries because you hit someone that hard 100 times versus 50, that's just wear and tear on your body, right? It's just sort of the natural way things are going to work around there.
I wouldn't phrase it as quote a comfort with higher levels of player
Yeah.
injury, but I get where James Murphy is
Yeah.
coming from
A
with
lack of
that because
surprise, maybe. Yeah.
yeah, I mean their practices overall are more physical. I mean I think most fans love it when Marcus Freeman says he's looking for violence right before the start of the game.
Yeah.
But it's a fair question, and that's why this unprecedented level of depth, you would have to go back decades to match this. It's at an opportune time.
It's ironic because, from a sports science point of view, their practices are more reined in than they ever have been because they're smarter. However, Freeman simply wants physical practices. He needs physical periods. His challenge everything does not mean you're doing your thudding all the time. Sometimes you have to tackle, and it's
Yeah,
just part of it. You can't be violent on Saturday if you're not
right.
on Wednesday.
And it's isolated. It's not physicality all week. It's an
Right, of course,
isolated
but it's
moment.
it's
But
coming somewhere.
yeah,
At some point you got to survive it because the hitting's coming. But Statman72 followed up with, I don't follow game by game snap counts, but I assume many blowouts last year allowed ND to reduce starters' workload over the course of the regular season. We anticipate closer games this year, so should we be concerned about possible fatigue late in the season?
I mean, I would imagine, but if guys like, we've talked how many times we've talked about Max Bulla and how well he balanced the
Yeah.
snap level for the each of the linebackers last year. I think it's a coaching staff that's conscious of that. But again, I mean, a good question. I would imagine scores are closer this year, but let's see. Notre Dame's one of the best teams in the country. Some of those games, there will be a at least a couple and probably more of games. Like I go into games always. I learned this from Lou Holtz. What can go wrong? I'm thinking about what can go wrong, so I don't just assume a win over NC State, even though we all know Notre Dame's better than NC State when they play in Notre Dame Stadium. But um, I think some of these games will probably end up not as close as we're anticipating now, just because Notre Dame is taking it up to another level and their depth is so good.
And I think to that point, when you look at like the defensive line group in particular, like obviously Jordan Botelho already went down with injury, but there are some units like that one, like the linebacker group, where there's some linchpin leaders that turned over this last offseason where they're going to have to go to deeper rotations and get, more of their bench involved just to cover off some of that experience gap as well. So I think that if you're worried about fatigue, I think that especially in the defensive front seven, there's an argument to be made that Notre Dame will have to go to a deeper sort of rotation this year than they did last fall, which will help kind of relegate or navigate some of that stuff pretty organically.
But
Go ahead, Tim.
well, I mean, what Eric is saying is absolutely correct, but stop me when I name somebody that and Botello's off the list in the short term, but stop me when I say a name that
Can't play.
most of
Yeah.
us have confidence in. Boubacar Traore, Logan Thomas, Bryce Young, Josh Burnham. I like Cole Mullins. He seems to be trending up. Junior Tui Alamaka at defensive tackle, Donovan Hines, Jason Anye, Elijah Hughes. We'll see about him, but I think he's got some ability. Sevillano may be a year away. Armel Mukum is inching closer. Jared Dawson is a starter. Gabe Rubio is a starter. I
Yeah.
mean, I just named like 12 defensive linemen that there is a common theme with them, and that is all these guys can play.
And there's no Cross and Mills, so I think if you want to look at it this way, like Cross, even the kind of hampered Howard Cross, they played 20 players on defense against A&M and Northern Illinois. That was not the plan, but they ended up playing 20 against Northern Illinois. When you start getting later in the year, you're seeing 28 and 27 and 26, and even and I'm not talking about like when they're destroying Purdue when you're going to play 28 people, but just going out there against Virginia and some other teams. So the depth grows as the year goes on. There will be a heavy defensive line rotation in Miami. Otherwise, they're going to pass out
Yeah.
on Labor Day weekend. But you're not seeing Leonard Moore going out much unless you're worried about cramping onto your corners.
That's a different situation.
Yeah.
I am really intrigued, especially since the heights and weights came out. Really intrigued with the pairings on the inside of the defensive line. Dawson's down to 288, Rubio's 322.
Yeah.
We've been thinking Dawson knows Rubio 3 technique. I'm not sure that that's exactly how that plays out. So I'm interested to see the pairings behind him. Onye, I think we were surprised back when that he was at nose. Well, now he's solidly over 300. So I want to see how they match those guys up on the inside.
This one from Air Pirate 73 has a related follow-up as well. Air Pirate asks, when I heard that Coach Ash was splitting our defensive ends out a bit wider, it appears that will improve two facets of our defense. Number one, the defensive ends will be able to defend the outside more, funneling the running backs into the middle and thus containing them. Number two, our ends will have more space to rush the QB and therefore will have many more pressures and sacks. Am I right, or why am I wrong?
Yeah, I may have overplayed this in the spring. I'm not saying they're going to play with wide splits with the defensive end all the time. I was specifically talking about passing situations, because if you split too wide, they're going to try to gash the middle, and then your D tackles better do a good job, and your linebackers better tackle appropriately, which they're certainly capable of doing. But I just think in theory, you still have to funnel things back to the inside. I may have overplayed it a little bit, but Tim, you were there. A couple of the defensive ends played it up pretty big when we talked to them about
they
it.
brought it up.
Yeah.
I mean, they were there, you just kind of mentioned it and they give you all the advantages of it. Now, just to be fair, no one's going to talk about the disadvantages of it the first time they're learning it when they're players at Notre Dame and a new defensive coordinator introduces things. But I think it's relevant that it could be. I'm interested to watch it in the first two games and see if that is springtime fodder or something, a little tweak that, because, Chris Ash, we did say leaving that first meeting, he has to bring his own stuff to this. I know you're not reinventing the wheel, but you're the coordinator now. Al Golden set the tone for you. He set the table, but you got to, after that, you got to enhance from that point forward.
I mean, if anything, it's just it's an uptick in aggression.
Yeah,
I would think. I mean, and Golden brought a lot of pressure, but I wouldn't be surprised if Ash takes it slightly higher than that. You certainly I mean, you got to feel pretty confident on the back end of the defense with your corners.
yeah, and
You can
certainly
take those kind of chances.
Mickens loves with Mickens still there. He knows what they can do on that back end with those guys. Maybe Xavier Watts is the one concern there, but that's it. That's a story for a different podcast. I'll quit complaining about losing Xavier Watts since he was here like during COVID, and that's this guy that had to leave the program at some point. Philip Fell wonders, heading to the start of fall camp, which best on best battles do you look forward to watching? I love this question because I thought of one from 2009 immediately. Bryce Young versus Emil Wagner, maybe running backs versus linebackers. Moore and Gray versus the new wide receivers versus Greathouse. Are there sneaky good matchups that could surprise fans?
I haven't. Eric, why don't you go ahead and jump in there?
Yeah, there's a couple ones. I think my line of thinking reading this went to transfers, right? Because I really want to see some of the best of the new guys in town going up against the established talents at Notre Dame. So, in particular, the ones that really jumped out to me, I really want to see Malachi Fields going up against the corners, and in particular, Leonard Moore. Leonard Moore, I thought last year did a pretty good job when tasked with bigger body receivers. Christian Gray did the same thing. So, I think it'll be interesting to see that dynamic play out on the practice field. And I'm really, really curious to see Jaden Greathouse against Devonta Smith in particular. Greathouse is a unique receiver out of the slot in the way that he plays the game and the way that he just is so physical from that spot. I think it'll be an interesting matchup, but it's maybe this is assuming too much, but it's more of a matchup in the slot that's akin to what he would have seen in the SEC, that bigger bodied physical slot receiver, as opposed to maybe the lighter, faster guys that are more common in ACC Big Ten, because that's what they can get. So I think that those matchups in particular are interesting. And then just from what we all saw, obviously I'm not on the sidelines as much as you guys are, but just from hearing the feedback, I'm really curious to see Elijah Hughes this summer, man. I want to see him go against the starting offensive line and see what the true pass rush utility against an offensive line, an interior offensive line like Notre Dame's is, because as far as a proving ground goes, that's a great unit. You're going to see exactly what he can bring against top level talent and competition right off the bat. So I'm curious to see what the pass rushing skill set looks like there against guys like Billy Schrauth.
The best stuff is always, because we don't see enough of August practice. I get it in August. I don't get it in September. I get it in August. The best stuff is always receivers and corners. It's just you get to see competitive receiver corners. We don't see a lot of linebackers hitting running backs.
But it will be I haven't given this this question a lot of thought, because we won't get to see, we're not going to see anything live. We
might
may
see Fields, maybe one-on-one more would be fun the first practice or something.
Some one-on-one stuff, the receivers, DBs. We'll definitely get a chance to see some of those, but it'll probably just be one practice. Is that correct?
I think that's what it'll be. It's tentative, of course, but from the past though, Tim Priester, I remember. So it wasn't 09, it had to be 10. It was Kelly's first year. The Kyle Rudolph just going over, and there's no other way of saying this because this is what they call it, head tapping Manti Te'o in the red zone for a touchdown, and you just thought, holy cow, did you just see that play? Those type of matchups were fun to watch when you would see full, true scrimmage practices along those lines. And of course, I think Pete remembers this one. We were watching Will Fuller just destroy people at every practice, and finally Kavari Russell was healthy. And it was like, all right, now we get to see someone that can actually run with this guy. And it's so fun to watch, like the alpha dogs go at it. And then I also remember when I found out Jalen Smith was not the nicest human being in the world like I thought he was after he hit a certain running back out of bounds and had a few choice words for him. But that's good. He's violent.
Yeah, this is not along the same lines, but I'm curious about, we talk about Greathouse. Are Greathouse and Pauling both playing the slot? Does Pauling bounce out to the X? Who wins the number 2 job behind Faison? Is it
one of those two?
Yeah.
Well, one of those two bounces out and has the number 2 job there.
Yeah, but I think clearly Greathouse, it's been determined Greathouse is better in the slot.
I mean, after last year, I'm surely like that, but they move it around so much now. I really think only the boundary is the problem.
I'm still talking left tackle, weak side, right tackle, strong side. I realize that a lot of that has changed, but I think like all things being equal, that still is kind of the way they look at it. Joe Rudolph will refute that in a couple weeks. We have a question from Dr. Parnell 42. We were talking about Dr. Parnell because he's always very complimentary. I can always count on Dr. Parnell 42 being complimentary of my work, and that's because when I was answering phones back in the day with Lou Samoji at Blue and Gold, Dr. Parnell 42's father was calling me and talking about Notre Dame football, and he was a very learned football man who had a real problem many times with Lou Holtz. He didn't throw the football well enough. He didn't like the way he didn't like his approach. Anyway, Dr. Parnell 42.
All those stupid wins over top 10 teams. We got so
yeah,
annoyed over the years.
I know. Anyway, his question is, and we appreciate him being a great subscriber of ours. What is one thing that quarterback CJ Carr will be able to do this fall that we have not seen from an Irish quarterback in a long time? If a long time is Jack Cohn,
that's a long time.
That's a long time.
He's all right. Mine will be brief and I'll let Eric go after that. I just think he's the best pure passer since Clausen.
I think that's a good way to put it. I think he's going to be able to sustain a high level passing offense that Notre Dame hasn't seen probably since about that point. It's just the ability is different, man. We all saw it in the spring game 2 years ago.
Yeah. He's nowhere near as strong as Deshaun Kaiser, Malik Zaire, or as elusive as some guy. Or, he's not as smart as Sam Hartman. He's nothing compared to Riley Leonard's physical stature, but he is just a really good pure passer of the football. The throw game in favor of John Bryce. Yes.
Yeah. This was my reference in segment 1 about this will come up. Mike Denbrock wants to stretch the field. CJ Carr certainly has the ability to do that. I think from what we've seen of CJ Carr, and it hasn't been extensive, I think the accuracy of the screen game, the short passing game, I think that he's dialed into that. So I think there's going to be more the ability to show more consistency in that, which is great because you have a guy named Jeremiah Love that can move around a little bit. Look, this is not. I mean, I just can't. I can't look at CJ Carr and say that everything's going to be perfect. He's going to hit the ground running, and he's only going to throw 4 interceptions this year. That's not the way it usually works with young quarterbacks, no matter how good they are. But I mean, I think we all think CJ Carr is a special presence. Yes, once again, we're assuming that he is going to beat out Kenny Minchey, but Marcus Freeman has promised us a fair battle between the quarterbacks. But I think
that's happening right. The fair battle's happening now.
Well, that's for
8 days in August. So
that's very true. I saw Sampson had on the Athletic. He put like a survey out as a variety of questions, and one of them was, "Who do you think is going to win the starting job?" And I think it was like 97% or 93% in favor of CJ Carr, which is unfair to Kenny Minchey. But like as we talk about it, I mean, we could put the caveat in there every time we talk about the quarterback situation. I usually just start with CJ Carr and work from there. But and Dr. Parnell 42 also assumed that CJ Carr is going to be the starter. But I think first and foremost, the ability to push the ball down the field and just an overall, greater ability to throw the football accurately, at least over the course of time. There's going to be some misreads that we're going to say, well, that was inaccurate. It was a misread. And CJ Carr, whether it's Carr or Minchey, they just have to get accustomed to seeing college defenses at full speed.
Next question from Nick Gruby. In your opinion, who is the most talented commit ND has landed in the 26 class so far? Who is the most important? The recent Premer commitment makes things interesting for me, and I am going to struggle to say Premer for the next few months because it looks like Premer to me, man, but it's Premer. Here we go.
It rhymes with my last name, sort of, kind of. Premer Priest.
Try that. I'll try that every time. All right. Eric.
It's a good question, man. I think the lean-to answer for me is probably Rodney Dunham is the best prospect in the class. He's the highest rated. The upside there as a high-value position as a pass rusher is tremendous. There's a lot of talent there, but he is coming off of an ACL tear, so there's maybe a slight adjustment period just in the rehab side. So I'll say I think the best or most impactful prospect so far is probably Joey O'Brien for several reasons. One, obviously the multi-positional versatility is something that is uncanny with prospects. We talk all the time about guys, he could play wide receiver, he could play corner. In plain English, what that means is we don't necessarily know if he's good enough to play receiver or corner, but he might be able to play either. For Joey O'Brien, it's actually like, no, this guy could play both at a pretty high level. I think it's pretty decided that his ceiling is higher at DB, but the talent there, the quickness there, the ability to dive into passing lanes there. He was just the OT7 MVP for the 3 days of work he just put up. Like, this is a unique cat who he might not have the quickness that Kyle Hamilton had with just the sheer like change of direction or backpedal or things like that, but just the overall athletic skill set. He is the closest prospect since Kyle Hamilton, or to Kyle Hamilton since Kyle Hamilton. That includes guys like Jadon Blair and other ones like that. He's as close as you're going to see. So he's definitely the number one for me. Most important, though, I would say is Javian Osborne. The amount of vocal messaging and peer recruiting that guy does for this class is substantial. And when you want to talk about like the local leadership qualities that Notre Dame looks for, Notre Dame looks for problem solvers. In Marcus Freeman's own words, Javian Osborne has taken it upon himself as a leader of this recruiting class to be a problem solver. Notre Dame needs receivers. That's fine. I'm going to be in their messages. Notre Dame needs to finish out this offensive line class. That's fine. When they're on campus, I'm going to make sure that I'm introducing myself, my fellow commits, all of their families to these players. There is a problem-solving mindset to the way that Javian Osborne has approached this class that is just so in line with the leadership qualities Notre Dame looks for. It's hard for me to overlook that in terms of most important. I think that there's a certain glue aspect there that is intrinsic but significant.
I chose to look at this as as players that I think should be ranked higher than their classmates, or just in general. I love Aiden Pouncey.
I knew you were going to say him
Did
first.
you say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Is he the sixth best player in the class? I don't believe that that's true. I would. Wow, I don't want to put myself behind the eight ball, but I'd put him second to Dunham. I'd be tempted to put him second behind Dunham. I love O'Brien. I probably wouldn't rate Adams third in the class. I'd put Premer ahead of him, maybe Osborne ahead of him. I know Osborne doesn't necessarily have breakaway speed, but I love Pouncey. If Notre Dame lands Caden Finley, he will be up there very, very well. He won't be like, what's he, 139th? Eric, I mean, I like.
I know that's Pouncey for some reason. I know at the top.
That is no, you're right. That is Pouncey.
Yeah.
Finley is 216 on 247, 110 in the composite.
That's absurd. That's absurd down there. I mean, that's just my opinion. Two guys that are ridiculously ranked low are Preston Frizzell and Grayson McKeo. Those guys are absolutely top 200 players at their position, or overall prospects. If Notre Dame had gotten Alistair Vallejo, I would have ranked him high too. I was watching. Thomas Davis is forgotten because he committed so long ago. Have you seen him play?
He's violent too. He's violent too. We're talking about violence. Yeah,
and the maturity. When you see guys in high school that move like college players, you put a check mark by those guys, and I start moving them up, and I think that he's one of those guys as well.
He's excellent in space too, man.
Yeah. I had three categories. The most important is Dunham because he plays a position where you need 5 stars coming in.
Well, that's true. And to your point, Eric, Davis in space, I was just watching him this morning, and that was the first thing that I wrote. And they allow him to work in space against wideouts and stuff, tight ends, and he's
a lot of trust.
Yeah, he's quite capable.
I do think O'Brien is the most talented, though. I know it's an easy answer, but
he's a mutant. Yes, he is.
I just think it's. I don't need the versatility out of him playing wide receiver and all that stuff. I just need his talent at safety, and then I put him there. But Dunham is so important at the position. It's a 5-star edge rusher that works out. That works out for Notre Dame is massively important. We used to talk about Jonathan Williams and Colin Hill coming in as projects, Tim. This is what you need when you're recruiting defensive ends.
Hill was a key player early.
He was.
You want to talk about projects too, like Ebenezer Iwatade is a guy who physically he's a project. He needs some work. He needs to fill in the frame. But you want to talk about tools coming off the edge, man. I mean, he's right up there with Dunham in terms of like Sunday caliber tools. He just needs to fill in the weight and things, right? There's a lot of potential, untapped potential there. He's a guy who shouldn't be forgotten in this class because if you look back, 3-4 years from now, and Iwatani is the highest drafted player from this class, I don't think anyone would necessarily be surprised just given what he has to work with.
Yeah, I was outside the Goog a little more than a week ago, or I don't know the days, but when when that last group came for a visit and they come up on a bus and Notre Dame does a great job of bringing them off individually so you can get pictures of them. I wasn't the previous week where they had 20, 21 guys. There were only six, but when Iwatane's length, when he came off the bus and starts striding toward you, it's like, whoa, he needs to fill out. I mean,
Yeah,
he's a
100%.
project, but what to your point, I get exactly what you're saying, Eric.
Our final question is a fun one from Pin and Poll. You're hosting an Independence Day barbecue, and you have to invite one current or former player, one current or former coach, and one ND football adjacent person, such as a fan, alum, administrator, or media. Who gets your invitations?
I want Eric to start because he had an opportunity to know guys
Right.
way better than we
That's
ever
true.
did.
That's true. These are all going to be from one era. Here we go.
Former players tough. I got some boys who might get mad at me. I would say former player. It's kind of a tough toss up, but the two guys that I've probably maintained the best relationships with would be Miles Boykin or Jafar Armstrong. Just great dudes. Would definitely invite those guys. All right, so one current player. Um, Comedic wise, I would really like to invite Bryce Young just because I'd look really tiny next to him. I think that'd be quite funny. But on the other side of things, a little 5'5" guy standing next to him would be a hell of a sight. Realistically, though, I'd be interested to pick CJ Carr's brain. I'm just kind of curious about the way he's wired and kind of what his anticipation is going into this year. Former coach, I'd have to invite my former boss, Clark Lee, because he's like the nicest human being
Oh
alive.
yeah.
Um, you want to talk about good company? You're going to have a high bar to clear. Uh, Former coach or current coach, excuse me, Mike Mickens, because that guy's the man, and I just want to shake his hand and tell him as much. And then Notre Dame football adjacent person. There's a couple people I could say, like people that I worked with, Aaron Carney, Michael Birch, people who have since departed Notre Dame, who I had a lot of respect for. Um, but really, adjacent people is interesting. Honestly, I think the person I would bring back, because I haven't seen him in a long time, and I just always really appreciate the conversations I had. Don Bishop, who used to head up Notre Dame's admissions department, great guy, just an excellent human being, loves everything that Notre Dame is about. And once again, you're talking about good company at an event like this. It's tough to beat a guy like Don Bishop, who's also just in general the Notre Dame admissions department, pretty talented group of people. Don Bishop knows more about sports than I think most people in admissions. I always was able to carry a conversation with him. And his predecessor, Dan Saracimo, paints a beautiful watercolor. So Notre Dame knows how to find some talented people in admissions, man. Interesting folks.
When I was at the first job I had when I was at Notre Dame, I was in admissions. I worked admissions. They didn't let me within 1,000 miles of the athletes, but I was in admissions. Current player, I agree. I'd say CJ Carr. And I'll try to make this brief because I have almost half a century of football players here. But former players, like we're talking about a party now, right? I mean, this is
We
Independence
are.
Day.
I cut Montana, even though I should have it in my place. But go
Yeah.
ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I want Tony Rice there because I know that it'll be a good time. He'll have a good time. How could we not invite Kurt Heinisch?
Oh yes, I didn't
How
even think
could we
about it. No,
not
that's easily the
have
one.
Kurt Heinisch at a party? That would just be a hoot. And I'll pick out some of the older guys. I mean, Frank Stams and Wes Pritchett would be hugely entertaining. My deep respect for BY Bryant Young. He would definitely have to be there. How about Riley Leonard? I mean, he was enjoyable every time we had an opportunity to speak with him, and he enjoyed those opportunities. But my
Yes.
sleeper pick is Notre Dame kicker Kevin Pendergast, who had the greatest sense of humor. He did a Holtz impression. I think he did a Holtz impression in front of Holtz more than one time. He ran into a little bit of trouble
I say
after
DraftKings is legal now, so he can come to the
yeah,
party.
he
It'll be
he
fun.
ran
There's
into a little bit of trouble after he left Notre Dame, but I've tried to get a hold of Kevin Pendergast in the past and have not been successful. But I think this question, pin and poll, will prompt me to try to do that again. L Washington. I want to have a beer with L Washington, so a July 4th holiday would be good. Urban Meyer coaching Notre Dame. I don't think I could get him to come to a 4th of July party. Chip Long would be right up there
Yeah, he's high
because
on the list.
you could ask
Yeah.
Chip Long anything about anybody, and
He might just crash the party. If you have the party and don't invite him, it's perfect. He can just show
yeah.
up, then you get the extra person there.
Tim, did you ever meet David Benner, who ended up becoming the publicity guy for the Indiana Pacers? But he was a journalist for the
I did
Indy
not
Star, I
know.
believe. Tremendous sense of humor. Unfortunately, he recently passed within the last couple of years, but he would be a guy from the media that I would ask. And I know we're talking about Indy football adjacent people, but I absolutely would have Mike Bray at one of my parties.
Oh yeah, that's Bray is high on the list. Indy adjacent. I'm inviting Shane Gillis to the party for crying out loud. He's the fan that's
Good one.
coming. So there is no doubt Shane Gillis gets the first invite. For coach, I would go with, would try to have some flag football conversations. So it could be Marcus Freeman, Jared Parker, Joe Rudolph, Al Washington, or Gino Gaduli would draw up some plays, not in the sand, but somewhere along the line. That'd be a lot of fun. Mike Bray, I forgot, I wasn't going to say Mike Bray, but Mike Bray gets the first invite to all parties. There's not even close.
Yeah,
Donovan Heinisch, or not Donovan, Kurt Heinisch, sorry, Donovan. Kurt Heinisch gets number one. The late Big Lou Nix would be someone I would like to
that
have
would be fun.
at a party. On the current team, I enjoyed my conversations most with Anthony Knapp the first time. And I just want to see the coaches around Carson Hobbs when he's talking about why he's good at something. Could be cornhole, could be running sprints, it could be basketball, but I bet he would explain how good he was, and the coaches would have to rein him in a little bit. But Shane Gillis gets my invite. Mike Bray has to be there, and we'll talk flag football with one of those coaches. Actually, Jared Parker, one of the nicer guys you're ever going to meet, and it was really nice to see Parker at the national championship game when I was down in the Notre Dame's end zone before the game, and I got a note look up, and it was Jared Parker with his wife Candy, who was Declan's teacher's assistant too. So
There you
that was
go.
a lot of fun. But
Well,
you can't go wrong with all those guys we said. And man, I can't believe I blanked on Kurt Heinisch because that
Yeah,
dude's funny.
I mean Donovan's a nice enough young man,
Probably
but
funny too. I don't know, but
yeah, but he doesn't show it the way Kurt did. Kurt held court with the media many times.
yes. We are going to take the weekend off to celebrate our independence. We'll be joined by Penn State and Georgia fans on that one, celebrating Notre Dame's independence, maybe some USC people, but we'll be back instead on Monday, July 7th. Until then, everybody have a safe and happy holiday. For Tim Priester and Eric Thomas of Irish Illustrated, I'm Tim O'Malley. Thanks for watching and listening. Irish Illustrated Insider.